my name is Paula Boulton, and I have been invited to have a conversation with a younger lesbian. I'm 67. I'm a lesbian activist, and obviously I've been around for quite a few years. So I'm going to talk to you a bit about my lesbian activism, and we're going to compare notes and get to know each other. So I will be talking to.
My name is Annaig. I'm an Irish lesbian activist. I'm 25. And obviously I'm a lot newer to activism and feminism. And the landscape is, I'm sure, very different from what it was when you were 25. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what the differences are now, because it's hard now, but I'm sure it was hard back then as well.
Yeah, very different. Yes.
Yeah.
And of course, we've been helped by being given this list of questions. So the first thing was wearing some lesbian item of clothing. So I can see yours is fabulous. Lesbians don't do dick. Look at that.
I'm involved in Not All Gays. It's an Irish LGB group. And we founded the group back in May of 2023 there's myself and two other lesbians. We were friends before we started the group. So I spoke at Let Women Speak in Dublin, and one of the things I said that I repeated a few times without thinking, I hadn't planned a speech or anything, was lesbians don't do dick. So then we went to Filia in Glasgow, and we decided to get matching hoodies done up. One of the girls did hoodies, matching hoodies. So we did lesbians don't do dick.
Well, do you know, and I was at Filia in Glasgow, and we must have been doing that thing where you hover around.
I think I saw you a few times, but there was so many people at Filia.
So much going on, yeah. You might have heard me because I was playing my fiddle.
Yeah, you played was it the fiddle?
Yes, yeah, it was. Yeah, I do that anyway. Well, as you can see, I'm a musician, but I decided I was sick of it only being those of us that are known. So I said to women, "What do you mean you used to play the fiddle? Bring it along and we'll do it." So I was making up easy parts, and in the end, Filia fiddlers grew and grew, and we had about 10 women in the end.
Yeah, I know. Every time I would walk through in the hallway, I would see more women with instruments.
That's how it happened. But yeah, so I'll have to stand up. There we go. This is what I wear when I'm doing my Lesbian Labour thing, and that's the main focus of my well, it has been the main focus of my lesbian activism for the last since 2019 2020, because Lesbian Labour grew out of Labour Women's Declaration, which is what I was involved in first, and there was lots of women in the Labour Party who were basically just trying to follow 7 key basic principles about the right to talk about how self-ID might affect 50% of the population.
Yeah.
And we had a meeting. There were lots of subgroups happening. Women that were in the Labour Party who might have been councillors were having a subgroup. Trade unionists were having a subgroup. And regionally, there were groups gathering. And then 2 or 3 of us, including Mary, who's doing the tech for this, said, why don't we have a group for lesbians in Labour and see if we have any gel? And actually, it was really important to do that because the conversation about women's rights within Labour was being shut down all the time. You know, that no debate thing was happening. And I thought it'd be quite clever because they can't shut it down when you're part of the acronym. So I thought we could, as lesbians, open doors and get in there. And in fact, it's been even more of a no debate for us because we said straight away, we are lesbians and we know, like you know, Annaig, that lesbians don't do dick and they're not interested in talking to us. So
yeah, I think at least here, and we do have self-ID in Ireland, and you know, lots of terrible things have happened, including the prison situation. Like Barbie Kardashian is one of our most infamous situations that came out of self-ID. But I think, especially in my age range, the conversation is really difficult because so many people are still like, oh God, I don't want to be seen as horrible around my peers or whatever. And there's a very big culture of the being kind, so to speak. So it's really difficult to speak out, but I think we're at an advantage for being lesbians, gays, or bisexuals that, you know, other people can't really come at you for it because it's like, well, I'm part of that community that you've lumped me in with. So yes. I actually know what's happening inside the community. you don't. So let me explain. But yeah. I know then in general, on a bigger scale, it's we just get shut down as lesbians. So
yeah. But it's interesting that we both you know, thought that we would have some I don't know, some additional power,
yeah,
to be able to be within that argument. So is that tell me how you became a lesbian activist then, and why?
So I suppose I was always into women's rights, and then like from a young age, my mom is involved in this. She's a feminist activist as well. But when I was younger and figuring out my sexuality and realizing I realized that I was interested in girls just at the cusp of the start of the real surge of the gender situation. So that was and it was maybe, what age was I? 15, so it would have been 2013. So it was 2 years before we got marriage equality in Ireland, and snuck in on that referendum was also self-ID, which the public were not made aware of. There was no public consultation on it. No one really knew. We were just like, oh yeah, it's gay rights. And I went to one of the notoriously dreadful LGBT youth groups then when I realized to make, you know, other gay friends, and I thought it was going to be like a gay club to meet new people, potentially a girlfriend, and I got sucked into it and you know, thought that trans women are women and all of that because I was 15, 16 years old, just realizing that I was into girls. But I still, even then, had a hard boundary of, no, lesbians don't do dick. I was much more polite about it then, but still. And then after a few years, when I stopped going there, and I kind of was out of that friendship circle that I was involved in, then I started to realize the issues with self-ID and all of that, and how lesbians are really having what I think is probably the hardest time in all of it, because not only is it a women's rights issue, but also then a gay rights issue, and because we exclude men in every aspect, we are targeted the most. Yeah. And so that's why. And then I decided recently, or like in the last year, to break my anonymity online and stuff, because I feel like it's important for other young women, and particularly lesbians, to feel that, oh, it's not just older women that, you know, are saying this, it's also my peers are think that this is crazy. So I just think, because I didn't speak out for so long because I thought no one else my age was and that I was alone in it. So I broke my anonymity because of that.
Which is a very, very brave step, isn't it? What's the thing been like, you know, the kickback on you? Has it been?
So because like there's a few trans rights activists that are kind of well known in Dublin particularly, and they had kind of come for my mom a few years ago because she just questioned it under her real name. She's always used her real name when discussing the gender ideology issue and how it's in conflict with women's rights. And because I have her surname, they just kind of came for me because of that, because they already they aren't really fond of my mother. So they just kind of it was just maybe one or two of them just were mouthing off on Twitter, but nothing really. And I had an article in the Sunday Independent back in October talking about my experience in belong to the youth group, and how I feel like it was indoctrination and kind of coercion of particularly young butch girls into identifying out of their womanhood, girlhood. And that's when they kind of kicked off a bit on Twitter. But my boss the following day would, like, it was the Sunday, and then the Monday morning he gave me a call and he was like, I hear you're famous now. Joking. And he was like, no, really well done. He was like, I'm not going to talk about it in the office, but really well done. That was a brave thing to do. So I know I'm safe in work.
That's great.
And I'm lucky that I have the Not All Gays group. There's 9 of us in it. So
so you've got your posse, you've got your gang,
yeah,
your tribe. Yeah
so it's been fine. It's just been like a little bit of mouthing off on Twitter, but it's honestly at this stage, because you get it anyway on Twitter. I've been on Twitter a few years now discussing it, so it doesn't really bother me anymore.
Can I just take you back to when you said the when the law came in, you know, you got gay marriage and it was shoved in under the radar. Had there been evidence before that? Had there been a growing had there been a rise in people beginning to identify something else?
Not that I had noticed. Like, I'm trying to think. I had only ever met one, and she's a butch lesbian, and she was actually the first like lesbian my age that I had met, and it was in school. And then I went to an all girls school for secondary school, and then I actually ran into her recently, and it is quite upsetting. But she identified then, we would have been 14, and that was the first time I'd even heard of transgender. Like, I'd seen, you know, drag queens or whatever in town when I was much younger, and my mom just said, oh, like, you know, these are just men in dresses, or people who, I don't know, transvestites, what used to be normally called transvestites. But then I hadn't really noticed. But then again, I was like 14 and dealing with my own life, and you know, you're kind of oblivious to the world around you, a little bit self-absorbed when you're a teenager. So I didn't really notice much. So I'm not really even sure who is calling for the self ID.
That's what I'm trying to work out, because what, you know, there have, as we all know, there have always been people who've challenged themselves and wondered if they are, and trans people, etc. And you know, all through when I traced it back, I was thinking, oh crikey, that was 2010 when a bloke said, can I come to the lesbian disco? No, you can't. You're a bloke, you know. But there was always somebody sitting in the corner at the lesbian discos in a frock.
Oh God.
None of us were wearing frocks, so it was, you know, it was a bit weird. But there was just, you know, they were just there. There wasn't any issue or really much talking about it. So I'm wondering if your friend was kind of a genuine. I'm not saying everybody now isn't genuine, but was she part of the indoctrination? That's what I think I'm trying to say.
I think so. I think like has genuine gender dysphoria, like, you know.
Yes, there you go. That's it. They're the right words.
I think she was actually like really struggling, and she seemed like, when I ran into her recently, she seems happy in herself, has a girlfriend, you know, with the happy in herself in the sense that she's on hormones and has, you know, presenting fully as a man, has facial hair and stuff. That's why I'm saying it's kind of upsetting, because I know what's actually going on and like that it's being pushed on kids. But she seems happy in herself, so like, at least, you know, not desperately sad for her and her life seemingly. But I think there was a handful of trans identified men, older men, who did push for it. And then I know Trans Equality Network Ireland, TENI, they're a heavily state funded NGO, who they would have pushed for it. I can't even remember who was involved in it at that back then. But there was a few of them. Mostly they've had American CEOs or like trans-identified males on the board and stuff that have pushed for it. There's been a few of them that are quite extreme in their attacks on women who, on our side of the conversation, who, you know, are just saying, no, self-ID is dangerous for XYZ. They would be quite aggressive online to us. I think there was a few of them, and they were interviewed on our national broadcaster and stuff, but they're not really active. The ones from back then weren't really active, and there wasn't that many of them, but now there's.
Yeah. Well, there you go. They've taken over the whole lesbian thing. So let's talk about lesbians.
Yes.
Should we do that? Shall we?
Yeah.
Yes. Because it's interesting, you know, obviously that was for you to move from those youth groups and become aware through talking to your mum, and that lesbian feminist women's world is what sorted your head out, because that's what did it for me.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, all those years ago when I was a kid, I mean, you know, there was sexual exploration with other girls, and that was practicing.
Yeah.
Practicing for the real thing. And oh, all right then. Okay, you just go along with it. And I was in 1970 when the Women's Lib thing happened.
Yeah.
I was 14, and I'm from a communist family, and we used to get a paper called it was the Daily Worker, but the Morning Star.
Yeah.
And it reported the Women's Lib marches. So, and I used to believe what I read in my paper. I knew the rest of it was lies.
Yeah.
So I thought that was it. I thought we had Women's Lib. And I'm not kidding. I went to college thinking that we had it, that we liberated it. So I was wandering around, taking my space up, being assertive, and thinking I had a right to my own autonomous sex life.
Yeah.
Also, the pill was coming in as well. So there was this whole freedom, but nobody mentioned that freedom might also be with somebody of the same sex.
Yeah.
You know, so if you did have those feelings, which I did, then you found another way of justifying it. Or, you know, for me, it was just part of the freedom of the 70s sexual revolution. That's great. Okay, well, you can do what you like. So, you know, it's interesting that in terms of activism, I had no clue that there was any activism in that particular area until I got to college, and there was the Gay Society.
Okay.
And I also, interestingly enough, we had a kind of a pastoral tutor, and she was bisexual. And I've been fascinated as to why this was even something that would be mentioned. You know, it's kind of like, oh, right, that's relevant somehow. And I couldn't ever work out what the relevance was, but she was very interesting, was April. Very, very interesting, very good pastoral tutor. And then I think she might have mentioned it because two of the boys in our, you know, study group or whatever pastoral group were gay. So I was Jeffrey and John's supporter at college, because there was a huge PE department at the college I was at, and the PE blokes were really horrible. You know, I remember helping John and Jeff do a poster, you know, for a meeting of the Gay Society, and the PE blokes scrawled horrible stuff all over it. So I mean, good old proper homophobia, but it was all about the men. It didn't occur to me that this was relevant in any way to me. And then I studied dance. One of the things I studied anyway, and I was asked to perform in a particular dance, and I was playing the part of a younger woman who ended up in a relationship with an older woman, and it was a beautiful piece. And I act as well. So, but after the piece, I was approached by the Gay Society about joining them. And again, I was completely befuddled, because it was, well, why would you, well, look what you've just done. Well, no, that was dance. But the thing is, other people, when I came out to my best friend in 1988, I sat her down and I said, Mandy, I have to tell you something. And she actually said, oh, is that all? I thought you were going to tell me you were getting married. That would have shocked me. And apparently her mum had told her to watch out. She said, that Paul is a lesbian when I was 12. Well, it would have helped if somebody had, even said this is a possibility. So
Yeah.
anyway, it was a very different world. It wasn't something that was talked about. And as I was thinking about activism and what, when did lesbian activism become a thing? Because I've been a political activist for years.
Yeah.
And I mean, our next question to each other actually is about how we got involved in lesbian activism or the women's movement. So maybe if I answer that now, that
yeah
get us to that, because it was really strange. I didn't think much of women, actually. They were pretty boring, pretty wimpy. It was cakes and dresses and talking about the boyfriends all the time and makeup and stuff. And, it didn't really interest me. So I, for years, thought that men is where it was at.
Yeah.
Where they were the ones that were doing stuff and that had the power and the agency in their lives. And so I had an absolute light bulb moment. And that's why I know it's possible to change people's awareness, because I know it happened to me. Right up until that moment, I couldn't see, and then I could see. And
Yeah.
I'm going to fast forward because obviously there's loads. But one of the things I did was I joined an international peace walk.
Okay.
And it was in 1982, and I'd finished college. I'd gone and lived in Holland. I'd lived in communes. I'd done all sorts of hippy dippy stuff. But in terms of the movement, I wasn't aware there was one. I knew there was a peace movement because I was part of it. And it was a mixed walk. So there were not only like lots of different nationalities, but there were also men and women. And one of the women, we used to have these circles where you'd all speak in turn. It was all based on nonviolent direct action principles and living in peace camps. And this woman, Carol Bellin, she said, I'd like there to be a women only tent because I'm losing sight of my lesbian sensibilities. And I stood up and argued her down. And
Okay.
I spoke on behalf of the men, and I said, we're walking to Moscow to break down walls between East and West, and you are trying to erect them between men and women. How ridiculous, la, 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 and blethered on for a good while until the men shut me up and said, we can speak for ourselves. Thank you very much, Paula. And none of them had any objections because they were all good, good blokes, basically. I couldn't see it. And the next day I woke up in the women only tent because they chose my tent, which happened to be, I was in one of the big marquees.
Yeah.
And I woke up and it was the women only tent. And all the women were in there talking in a way I'd never experienced, I'd never heard. And I just sat with, I was absolutely shocked. They were making really sensible suggestions about stuff, things that they never said at the meetings. And when it came round to my turn, we all got turns.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, why have none of you spoken up before? Because we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be in this bloody awful field. We might have been. Why didn't you say that yesterday? We could have been pitched up somewhere else. And I remember Sherry, she was an artist from Wyoming, and she said, well, with all due respect, Paula, it's hard to get a word in. And the idea that anybody wasn't assertive had also passed me by somewhere. And I went on a silence fast for 2 days. I didn't speak. I listened for 2 days, and it was an absolute life changer. And I realized that all these things that I thought were my unique ideas, if I counted to 10, somebody else had come up with the same idea.
Yeah.
So it completely reversed my sense of that I was driving this whole, movement. No, Paula, you were just a mouthy, gobby, very quick to speak person. And that was it. I mean, so much learning instantly.
Yeah.
And, and of course, I will say, and I know that it's, I'm very fortunate not to have had, until that point, I haven't had negative things happen to me to do with, men and women. lots
Yeah.
of other women around me had. And we used to have women's groups. And that's when they were starting talking about, you know, abuse or rape or domestic violence or anything that had happened to those women. And given that it was lots of different countries as well, you then immediately got this internationalist perspective on what was happening. And
Yeah.
therefore, wait a minute, if it's happening to you in, you know, in the States, and that woman in Ireland, and that woman in France, hang on, is there some other system? And that was then, wait a minute, is this patriarchy, sexism, blah, blah, blah. And that's when one book that I had read in 1980 was The Female Eunuch by Germaine Greer.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember it doing something to the back of my head. You know, it was kind of like jiggling my ideas
Yeah.
around. But it didn't have, I didn't have any relevance for it, or I didn't have anywhere to put it. And suddenly those kind of incipient ideas and the practicalities of the lives these women had been living, what had happened to them, and then being able to see the dynamics within the peace camp of
Yeah.
what was happening, everything that had been like this suddenly went like that. And it honestly, it was a complete light bulb moment. And the next couple of years, I mean, I went to Greenham Common whilst I was on the walk to Moscow. There was a period where we couldn't walk any further because it was winter, so we were overwintering in Bavaria in this freezing cold
Oh my God.
camp and a watermill, and it was crazy. And I thought, well, it's all very well, we can sit and freeze our asses off here in a field, or I can go back to England and do some fundraising, which might be a more sensible use of my time. And it so happened it was when there was the massive Embrace the Base demonstration at Greenham Common, December 1982. And I hitchhiked all the way back, dropped my rucksack, and turned to the fence. And I don't know if do you know anything about Greenham before?
No.
Yeah. There was a base, a military base in Berkshire, which is south, you know, not much lower than London, but around there.
Yeah.
And the Americans were going to put cruise missiles there. So we
Okay.
would have been the place that the nuclear weapons were being fired from. And these things, you used to put them on the back of lorries and drive off into the countryside and fire them from there to fool the enemy, because where were the missiles coming from? Complete lunacy. And there was a massive women's peace movement at the time, which had kind of started with Women for Life on Earth, who basically said, well, this is nonsense, isn't it? And when nobody would listen, they decided to walk from Wales to Berkshire and have a peace walk. They'd arrived, nobody listened, so they chained themselves to the fence, suffragette style, and didn't go home. So women were coming from all over the place to live at this nuclear missile base, which was a 7-mile round perimeter fence.
Oh my God.
And live in the mud and the rain and the hostility from the locals, because this wasn't doing much for their house prices.
Yeah.
And make the case that nuclear weapons were the way to the end of the world. So let's not do that. And this particular event I turned up for was kind of like the biggest demonstration so far. And the entire 7-mile perimeter fence was surrounded by women holding hands.
Oh my God.
And it was life-changing. You know, women had taken things that reminded them of their lives. So, you know, some women had got their pictures of their family tied to the fence, others had hung their wedding dresses or tampons, or, you know, all sorts of things that represented what they wanted to say about, we are women and we believe in peace. And you lot over there with your guns and weapons, it's not okay. So we need it again right now. The world is going to pot again. But at that moment in time, we seriously thought we were on the brink of a nuclear disaster. So the fact is that the nuclear clock at the time was 4 minutes to midnight, and it's now 2. So we're closer than we ever were, but you wouldn't know that because we're all busy talking about whether some fucking blue hair is a man or a woman. Excuse me. I don't want that eradicated either. That can stay. Sorry, just got a bit cross there. Anyway, back to Greenham. There I was, turned up with my rucksack, what am I going to do? I said to a woman, do you know where I can leave this? And she said, you can leave it in my car over there. It's staying, so am I. So I said, thank you very much. And that was me. I thought, right, here we go. And I turned around and looked at the base, and there's this bleak, there's, you know, layers and layers of fence and barbed wire, and it's really hostile, and there's all these, you know, blokes with weapons inside. And I thought, well, I don't know what to do now. Here I am. And I saw a woman dressed as a witch, the hat, the lot, you know, and I thought, she looks like she knows a thing or two, or knows what she's doing. So I walked over to her. I said, hello, I've come all the way from Germany today. I said, what are we doing? She said, why did you come? So I said, to embrace the base. And she said, well, there it is, get on with it, and walked off. And it was like, oh, fuck, right, you mean we just do it? There's not a plan. And that is the essence of women's organising. We never have a plan. We just do what needs to be done there and then. And that was it for me. I had an amazing couple of days there. I stayed over, and I'm gonna nip to the one of the questions is, what was your most exciting thing?
Yeah.
Actually, because it's part of this story, I'm going to tell you now.
Yeah, of course.
On the second night, we were learning all sorts of songs, and there's a beautiful song, under the full moonlight we dance, spirits dance, we dance, joining hands we dance, joining souls rejoice. It goes on, and I learned the song with everybody else. We all joined hands, masses and masses of women, and we danced a spiral. And I don't know if you've ever danced a spiral, but you need to once in your life. And what happens?
I've heard of the spiral. That I haven't done it, but I know from Philia, because, but I just didn't know the whole context.
Okay, well, basically,
why it was happening.
Basically, the woman that's leading it goes into the middle, and before you know it, every woman is passing every woman as you snake around, and you pass belly to belly. My God. And it's the most powerful thing I've ever done. I tell you, you can feel, well, you know, when you go close to somebody and you feel their aura, you feel their energy, and you see each other eye to eye, you're looking into each other's eyes. It's just fabulous. And then it swivels round, and then you're back to back. This went on for about half an hour. I tell you, it was just, I knew I was home. This was something, this was a world that I hadn't known existed. And I was whole at that point. And when I got back to my actual house, where I was staying with my dad, and he went like this, he went, they've got you, haven't they? So I don't know what you mean, Dad. And he said, they've got you. I can see it. You're different. And he was right. But there you go. So that was my introduction to the women's movement. There I was. And I haven't, you know, it was women's peace movement, and the other bit comes later. But that's that bit.
No, that's so interesting, because I had heard about like that time period and like the women's movement around it, but I just didn't know that it was like a nuclear thing, or what it was, why it started. But I know about the Greenham, but I had no idea of the context, just because. Yeah, so no, that's so interesting. And I can't believe how many women it must have taken to do like the whole way around the 7-mile radius.
Well, in the song we say 30,000 women strong, bring the message home. So it's, you know, about that many. Where are they all now? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, where are all the women? Where are all the women fighting about this? Like the current problem in women's rights. But I suppose I don't even know when I would have kind of been aware of feminist ideas or like women's rights. I know that my mother's mom was a feminist as well, and would have, you know, advocated. I didn't know this until after she passed away, and it was in one of her eulogies about all of this, you know, firing bras over wires and stuff, like, and I had no idea, which was crazy, because then I had started, you know, we had the 8th Amendment in our constitution, which banned abortion, and that was a huge thing, and we finally repealed it in 2018. But I would have been aware of those issues growing up anyway, and my mom has, like, we would have had political conversations from a very young age. And I was always one of those kids that, yeah, I liked playing with all the other kids that were over, but I love to sit and listen to the adults talk. And I'd be kind of absorbing all of this stuff about politics. And then we had I'm trying to remember what my mom used to drag us out to protests all the time about various different things. Like, we had the water protest because they were trying to privatize water and charge us for water. And I was marched out, rain, sleet and snow, to the water protests very young, but I felt really passionate about it then, because I was like, why are we paying for water? We live on an island. I was like, this is crazy. So then, but my sisters they were in the buggy, and they were dragged out to every protest in the buggy, and we would march down the road, me and my brother holding on to the sides of our sister's buggy. And so I was always kind of aware of politics and different things that needed to be voted on, and my mom and dad would have talked a lot about it around the kitchen table. And so then with women's issues like the abortion rights, and my mom told, like, we've had a very serious history of abuse of women in Ireland because of the Catholic Church, and of course children. But so my mom would have taught us about what had happened and the suffragettes, and in school we get taught about the suffragette movement and the women of the 1916 rising and that. So I was always kind of aware, and I was like, wow, those women are so cool, fighting for all these things. And because we had to fight for so many things because of the Catholic Church, like obviously the right to vote with the suffragettes, but then just to be able to have, that you could work, because the marriage bar up until 1973, I believe, if you were married, you weren't allowed to work anymore as a woman. So there was that, and then there was abortion rights, obviously, contraception that wasn't allowed. Tampons were banned because of one of the bishops that had a heavy hand in writing our constitution. So I think my mom did, like, purposely taught us about it more, and like went in depth about, because she's a feminist as well, that she would have taught us a lot about, what happened to women through history and what continues to happen to Irish women because of different laws. So I was always kind of aware of that. And in school, even with the lesbian that I know who's now identifies as trans, I only remembered when I saw her, and we were just chatting when I ran into her recently, just kind of catching up. And I just remembered all of the conversations in religion class in school. It was like mandatory religion classes, but it was world religions, whatever. But we had a teacher who was pro-life, which that's, but she would always, she was very good, even though her views would be different from mine. She was very good at opening up the discussion to all of the girls. So we would debate, the whole class of 30, 14-year-old girls. We were asked to debate these issues, and we'd debate with her and against each other. And so I was always kind of, and me and that lesbian, she kind of gave me my voice. I was like, wow, she speaks out about these things so strongly. And I used to be so nervous talking in class, but then she would be like, no, you told me what you thought, on lunch. So say it, like, say your piece. So I think that's kind of where that would have been the start of it, when I started getting a bit lippy about things that I feel passionately about. And then obviously then I realized I was gay, and which, I don't know, that was kind of just normal in my school. I suppose I was very lucky because I was in an all-girls school, and it's also known as the lesbian school of Dublin. Like, there's a disproportionate amount of lesbian or bisexual girls in that school. It's just known for like pumping out lesbians. So it was just completely normal. And then I just realized, oh God, I have a crush on my best friend. This is not like how I feel about other friends that I'm really close with. And it just wasn't really a big deal. No one cared. Like, there was no even coming out. It was just like, oh yeah, I have a crush on Sophie. And no no one even batted an eyelid. They were like, okay. Some of the girls, I think, in my class, even when I was a bit older, because when I was going to the youth group, and I thought, this is embarrassing now that I'm like, you know, a radical feminist and gender critical woman. But when I was going to belong to my ex, she's my ex now, and she doesn't identify as trans anymore, and she wasn't on hormones or anything, but she was identifying as a guy, and so I was going around saying that this was my boyfriend, which just makes all of us laugh so much now, because it was just a butch woman with like a bob. But we, like, then when I'd say to girls in my class, or they'd be like, oh, what are you doing? I'd be like, oh, I'm meeting up with my boyfriend on the weekend. They were like, oh my God, you have a boyfriend? What? I thought you were gay. But I was still just, you know, still just another girl, just pretending to be a fella. But I, like, everyone just kind of was like, oh, I just expected that you were gay. And I don't know how, because I'm so feminine, and now I go into gay bars, and some of even lesbians are like, oh, she doesn't look like a lesbian, which that's kind of now I say my piece, and I've made like TikToks and stuff about it, because I've actually had like so many lesbians who in like gay bars being like, oh, well, I don't think she is a lesbian to the girl that I'm seeing. And it's like, what do you mean? What do you mean? You are also a lesbian. What, I have to dress a certain way to be like, it's just crazy. And I've always been very feminine. Like, I'm not, I like how I dress. Just the stereotype.
And that's always been there.
It's just crazy. And then like, I think it was that, and then like obviously then I started realizing about the trans issue and trans lesbians, and going, what, that had always been my hard line, and I was called transphobic for it even when I was in Belong To, and that's kind of why I stopped going, because I was like, oh, this is clearly not my place, because I have nothing against at the time, like, and I still don't have anything against trans, like, people who are gender dysphoric or whatever, but I knew that, oh, I'm not welcome here anymore, because I actually know what a lesbian is in a LGBT youth group, that I know what a lesbian is and what a lesbian is not. So I stopped going. But then the J.K. Rowling tweet, and my mom said it to me, she was like, oh my God, like this huge thing about, you know, if we don't recognize sex, then there is no same-sex attraction. And that just that was kind of the final piece for me that clicked in my head. And I was already like kind of getting there, but it just went, well, obviously, like, if you can't define what what that is, then there's no gay or lesbian.
Mm-hmm.
And that was always my hard line. And I just went, oh my God, this is crazy. It's actually gone crazy. And it's just continued to get worse, because now there's like, I've been on the dating apps only in the last year or so, because I had been that was another thing. I was in a relationship from when I was 18 up until like almost 2 years ago now, but we were together 5.5 years, so I didn't have to even think about it. I wasn't going in onto dating apps. I wasn't going to gay bars, you know, trying to find a girlfriend. So I wasn't like really exposed to it in face to face. And then the dating apps are just crazy, and that's why I was like, okay, no, enough is enough. I actually have to step up now, because lesbians are not being listened to, especially young lesbians, and everyone's scared. Everyone is scared about speaking out. Like, even the rest of the Not All Gays, like, they'll do stuff. There's only a few of the 9 of us that are willing to like put our names to it, because our careers, like, we're just starting out in our careers and stuff. Like, it's so difficult when you're in your 20s to go against all of your peers and go, no, I don't think men can be lesbians. We were banned from a gay bar recently.
I was going to say, there's I wanted to pick up on the bans. Before we get to there, I just don't want to lose what you said. There's two things in what you said.
Mhm.
Hearing you talk about being dragged out, activism from the cradle, basically.
Yeah.
And that was the same with me. There was the Aldermaston marches, the first ones, the anti-nuclear ones. I was there as a 2-year-old in my buggy,
Yeah.
it's the same. So both of us have imbibed from our families that if something is wrong, you get out and do something about it. And I think I didn't realize that it's almost like having been in training as an activist all your life, because it's natural to do.
Mhm.
It's not something we've had to learn. And it's the same thing for me, like setting up facilities, because I set up a women's centre and all the rest of it, because my dad had set up the Labour Club and the rugby club. And, I saw him perceive a gap and
Yeah.
then do what it was, do what was needed to activate the community and to provide a facility that was missing. So I think that's interesting, family activism and the training.
It's
But
funny. It's funny though, just about the family activism, because my sisters are now 15, and there's the referendum coming up soon for us here. And I remember when I was 14, 15, how excited I couldn't wait to be able to vote and to, get to be part of it and making changes. And I asked my sisters yesterday, and they just went, I have literally never thought about voting once in my life. And I was, even though they were dragged out, like we were all dragged out from just the same age, and they were out more than us because we were in school, like they were out every day at those water marches. And but the rest of them, the three of them, my three siblings, don't
not
like.
interested. Same here. I'm the one. So what is that about then? Nature or nurture? I don't know why.
I have no idea. And I turned to my mom then. I was like, where'd you go wrong with them? Like, what happened there? That they have no interest in even voting, never mind activism. Like,
Have you got 3 siblings?
yeah, my brother is, what age is he? He's gonna be 23 this year, and the twins are 15.
Yeah. I've got 3 others as well. I'm the middle girl, and then there's a boy at the bottom. So yeah, I don't know what it is then. Maybe some of us are just naturally born to be activists. Don't know what it is. The other thing is, when you talked about being at a girls' school, that is absolutely crucial. I mean, you were in a women-only environment.
Yeah.
So, it is much more, it is right. If people want to stop it happening, then they need to stop. If they want to stop lesbianism, they need to stop women-only spaces. And it's totally clear to the rest of the world, because as soon as you're all there together and you're not being divided and having to think of the male gaze the whole time and all of that stuff, then you have that richness of contact with other women, and you can appreciate each other, warts and all, and it's natural, absolutely natural. So banning, you tell me your banning story and I'll tell you mine.
So it's kind of recent, and we were misbehaving because we were drinking. But it was in December. Like I had been fine, and the staff would know me because of the girl that I've been seeing. Like, we're there a few times a week, but the staff would also know about my activism because I knew that they weren't pleased with me, but they weren't going to say anything or do anything. Since the article came out and my face was in the paper and my name, so they knew, where I stand on things. But they weren't going to kick me out because I'm well behaved and don't say anything, and I just ignore. Like, I'm not going to start fighting someone in the toilets. I'll just not go to the toilet, or just ignore and do what I need to do and leave. But then there was a big group of us, and Not All Gays had an award ceremony at the like a jokey kind of award ceremony. Just we had like a lesbian of the year, gay of the year, bisexual of the year, and then like kind of piss takey jokey awards. And we had a whole ceremony, and then loads of people came, and Mr. Menno came as well, which was great. He came over from London. But we went out to that gay bar then after the event, and people were writing on the desks, just in like a ballpoint pen, just small, and someone wrote lesbians don't have dicks, don't have dicks. And a few other people at the table were writing, I'm not gonna like I'm not gonna say who or how many people, but they were just writing like small things like lesbians don't do dicks, lesbians don't have dicks, you know, like, you know, gay men can be effeminate without being a woman, kind of thing, like that whole sentiment. And Mr. Meno had complained to the bar staff about, they have a sign that says "fuck you, J.K. Rowling" behind the bar, and Mr. Meno, he confronted them about it and said, no, like, I don't agree with that. You know, like, why do you have that behind the bar? It's really misogynistic. Like, you can disagree with her, but why are you saying "fuck you, J.K. Rowling"? Like, it's just very aggressive for no reason. And whatever, they didn't take it down. But then the following day on the Instagram story, the bar's Instagram story, they had a picture of the lesbians don't have penises written on the table, and they said, members of the LGB alliance, they know that it's not LGB, they know LGBA, they know it's not all gays, but I think they didn't want to draw attention to our group, and they can easily dismiss LGBA in Ireland because of the way that it's been reported here. But they just said, members of LGB alliance were in, you will be refused, like, you're not welcome. Not because there was people vandalizing their table. It was because of discrimination. They said, we don't tolerate discrimination in this bar. Because apparently lesbians do have penises. Is that what you're saying? In a gay bar run by lesbians, the owner's a lesbian. So what, like, and most of the staff, there's like 2 or 3 gay men, and then the rest of the people running the bar are lesbians. What lesbians do? What are you saying? Like, and we're being told we're not allowed back in because it's discriminatory to say that lesbians don't have penises. Like, how outrageous.
Well, that's really changed then, because my being banned story, so I live in a working class town. It's very poor. The steelworks was decimated back in 1980, and there was like 1 in 5 people unemployed, and you know, so the Women's Centre, which we started in 1986, became the place where working class lesbians would find their way, and there were loads of us. In the end, it was basically being run by lesbians, but we never did anything for lesbians. We kept our sexuality at the door because we were doing stuff for basically all the problems that came with heterosexual women, you know, whether it was domestic violence or, you know, the pregnancy testing. There was a whole load of stuff, but we had made a conscious decision that the space needed to be a non-sexual space, and that if we were being out as lesbians at the Women's Centre, then that somehow or other, nobody had asked us to do that, we did it ourselves, but we still were meeting. There was still like more and more, you know, it was a one at a time thing. You know, the first woman we helped into a refuge was leaving a domestic violence situation, and she left her kids, but actually she found a woman, and then when she came back to the town, her children were taken away from her. And that was common. And then, you know, she went and joined a group, and there was a survivors group somewhere, and she met another lesbian there and then brought her along. And it was this kind of like, so before we knew it, we had like a lesbian community, but it wasn't in any way political. And then after lots of years of us being volunteers, I went on a weekend thing that women's centres were all over the country, but there wasn't any actual network or organising. They were all autonomous responses to, you know, a lack of facilities for women. And there were the 70s Erin Pizzey domestic violence refuges and stuff, but the women's centres was kind of more like 80s, a response to Maggie Thatcher and Thatcher's Britain. And we all did things differently. But anyway, I went to this amazing gathering, and there were like 80 women's centres from all across the UK. I mean, it was amazing. And somebody had put up a timeline on the wall, and you could write your women's centre when it started. And 86, which is when I got together with my sister and we started one, there was like this massive list of women's centres. Then we had a workshop where we were talking about how we ran and how we were funded.
Mhm.
And we were going, funded? What funded? Never. It never occurred to me. So around 2000, I got together with some other women and said, well, look, other people are doing this. Let's learn how. And
Yeah.
we bid together and we got £750,000 from the
Oh my God. Oh
and
my God.
we created 7 jobs, proper jobs, well-paid jobs for women to run our women's centre. And I'm glad to say I got the coordinator's job. See, now I'd started the bloody thing and been running it as a volunteer for all those years. I'd have been pretty miffed if I hadn't. But because we'd created proper jobs, all equal pay, we were up against women. We had to put it advertised in the Guardian, so we had women coming from all over the place.
Yeah.
Anyway, I got the job, and as part of that, I had a budget to spend on resources, and that's when I realised we had no lesbian resources. So I bought a load of lesbian. What was it in those days? Must have been videos, lesbian videos, and books, and we had a little area. So if women wanted to borrow a book, so we had a lesbian lending library, which brought more lesbians in, because it was kind of like, oh, hello, I've come to borrow a book. And they didn't have to say, I'm a lesbian, where's the lesbian stuff? But I've come to borrow a book, you know. And then they'd go to this little area where there was just a row of lesbian videos and books. They'd write them in the little notebook and off they'd go. And we began to then be able to have lesbian events. But we still were kind of hidden. This only happened in the women's centre.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I said, do you know what? Why don't we just all turn up at a pub one night? Because if there's more of us than there is anybody else, it'll be by default a lesbian bar, won't it? Let's just do it. And we did. So there we were one night. We were at a pub called, shall I say or shall I not? No, I won't say. I'll keep it anonymous. There was a pub in Corby. And we all turned up. There were about 4 other people in the bar. That was it. So it wasn't even, we weren't even challenging anybody.
Yeah.
And we were looked around everywhere we looked. There was a lesbian. It was great. There we go. Job done. We're not even paying a higher fee or anything.
Yeah.
Great night. And at the end of it, a lesbian grandma. Well, she was a grandma, but she happened to be a lesbian. But this is how it was reported. And another a woman who happened to be her stepdaughter, actually. They had a hug, and this woman, sod it, Lynn said lesbians rule as she was leaving, and we felt like that. We felt like we'd got somewhere. This was 1998, by the way, which was the year you were born.
Yes.
That's the next question. What were you doing?
Yeah, what were you doing?
I was down the pub trying to get us all to be allowed in there. But anyway, the next week we met, and this woman went up to the bar, and the barmaid said, "Oh, I'm not serving you." And she said, "Well, what on earth? Why not?" And then she said, the landlord said I wasn't to serve you. So she came over and said, "I'm sorry, I've got to leave. I'm not hanging around if I can't have a drink." And well, what was that about? So anyway, we kicked off. There was an Irish woman, actually, who was very gobby, very mouthy, and very cross. And eventually the landlord was called to this bunch of women that were giving it loudy in the corner. I, in my usual mediator fashion, had gone to the other people in the bar and said, "Excuse me, I wonder if you would mind answering my questions. We're a group of lesbians and we are here drinking, and they don't want us here, and we want to know if you mind."
Yeah.
And they, the other 4 people didn't mind at all. Anyway, the landlord came down, he chucked us all out. The Irish woman was saying, "You can't do this to us, we've got rights." Well, I didn't know what our rights were, so I didn't know that we did actually have any rights, but she was, and he chucked us all out. He said, "I'm not being handbagged at dawn by you lot, out you go, and don't come back." So anyway, we put a story in the paper, and he agreed to meet me in the middle of the week to talk about it. And what I did is I recorded the conversation secretly, so we had this whole transcript. I mean, it was we were asked to talk about what was an exciting bit of activism. I'd forgotten that this had any excitement, but I remember being on the phone like trying to record down the phone this bloke. It was a phone as well.
Yeah.
It wasn't a mobile phone, it was a proper
Yeah.
dial-up job. Anyway, the backstory which came to light was that he was a new landlord and he'd been playing pool at one of the other bars, and somebody said, "What do you do?" He said, "Oh, I'm the landlord at the Black Swan." Let's say it wasn't the Black Swan at all. And they joked with him and said, "Oh, you mean the whatever," and used some very rude and discriminatory term about gay men. And he didn't know that this was traditionally the gay men's pub.
Oh.
We didn't know that either. It was complete chance. But so he'd just been made aware of the fact that his pub was the gay pub, and he'd walked in and the barmaid said, "Do you know there were a bunch of lasses in here?" And one of them said, "Lesbians rule" on the way out. "Oh, we're not having them back in here." That's what that was about.
Oh my God.
There you go. We got back in.
Well, thank God.
We brought him a lot of custom, so you know.
That's so funny. Yeah, no, how times have changed.
How times have changed.
We're getting banned. Now we get banned for different kind of lesbophobia.
Yeah.
1 second. I'm just gonna let the cat is screaming at me.
Okay. Let the cat in.
Come on. I hope her meowing is picked up on the.
Well, there's the proof that you're a lesbian.
She is one of 4 cats.
Oh, well, there you go. You're very lesbian now. Never mind the hair. We'll have to, you know, both of us forgot to deal with the stupid comments about not having long hair. Right. How did you get involved in lesbian activism? Most exciting lesbian moment. Go on. Let's have your most exciting lesbian moment, and then we're.
My most exciting lesbian moment. I don't know. I don't know if it would be considered. I think it would just be like feminist, because I think like
yes, that's
it's the same, like, because I'm, you know,
yeah,
feminism is coming from the fact that I'm a lesbian. Like, that's the angle that I always go. But I think the most exciting part of my activism, probably when we started Not All Gays, there's the hate speech legislation that's coming in, which there's a bill going through the government at the moment over here, and we've seen, you know, Christina Ellingson in Norway and other women in Norway with a similar bill, similar law, that's what's being proposed here, being investigated and, you know, potentially facing several years in prison for saying that men cannot be lesbians. So that was kind of what spurred us on to start the group, because we were like, the government is using LGBT rights and gay rights to push it, being like, this will protect gay people if we have, you know,
hate crime laws.
It's not a hate crime, hate speech that you can't, like, whatever. So that's kind of like, we were like, that's ridiculous. It's actually going to prevent us from saying lesbian, no, I'm a lesbian, I don't want to date a man who claims that he's a lesbian. No, absolutely not. So, and I know that people would report it, and because there's no definition of hate in this proposed law, it's just about how you feel inside. If you're a bit offended, and we know that there's so much hyperbole over what's deemed as hateful when it comes to trans ideology, everything is hateful. So I wrote individual letters on behalf of Not All Gays to all of the senators. It was going through our Shannon, and individual letters giving our point of view and saying, I'm a lesbian and I actually feel like I'm going to be targeted because of this. I'm not going to be, I'm not going to be protected by this legislation, and if anything, I'm going to be prosecuted under it for saying that I am same-sex attracted and not same-gender attracted. And there was 2 separate debates, and they were like, you can watch them live, and they named the group, and we were the only group the only like gender critical or feminist, actually, and no group from the other side of the debate was named. We were the only group that was named. We were named twice, and I'm still proud of it. I'm so proud of it. And then, but the most exciting would probably be my spur of the moment speech at Let Women Speak in Dublin, because I had no intention. I just went to, you know, show support, and we had our banner from Not All Gays, and it said "Stop Violence Against Women and Gays," which was a sign that it was a replicated sign from the first gay rights march in Ireland from 1983, that there was Dublin Pride for last year's Pride. They had doctored an image of this march that has this big banner that says "Stop Violence Against Gays and Women." So we swapped it around because it was Let Women Speak, but it's this big banner, like hand painted banner. But then there was a few little placards in the photo, and they had blurred it out and like really badly photoshopped. I'll have to show you. It's so bad. They'd photoshopped it to say "trans rights are human rights" in this thing from 1983 that was a protest.
Oh yes, I remember seeing that. Yeah,
and it was that protest was because Declan Flynn, a gay man, had been brutally murdered by 5 men in a park in Dublin, and the men got away with it. They got a slap on the wrist. So that was the start of our gay rights movement in Ireland, and Dublin Pride, a state-funded NGO, was doctoring images that are so important, and, you know, revising history very Stalin. Or no, is it Stalin? I'm making shit up now. But yeah, so we had caught that, and then Let Women Speak was a few months after. So we went, right, we're gonna have the sign. We know that these people will know what that picture is from, or like what the sign is referring to. It will rub them the wrong way, but it's to show like, no, gay rights and women's rights have always gone hand in hand. Women have always like fought alongside gay rights, and so we did. When I like didn't normally, if I'm going to something like that, I will make myself look a little bit, you know, not glam or anything, but just, you know, I pulled myself out of bed and barely put a comb through my hair. Like I was just disheveled and wore just black, and with the t-shirt that has our logo on it, and like didn't do my hair, didn't do my makeup, nothing. And like I was also hungover, and I just looked like crap. I was just gonna stay quiet and hold our little banner. But we went over to the side of the police were very good. The guards were very good. They kept, I'd say it was probably about 20 meters between, and they were like heavy duty barricades blocking the two sides. So they were really far away from us. But me and a few of us went over holding the sign. We didn't say anything. We didn't shout. We didn't sneer. We just held our banner that said "Stop Violence Against Women and Gays." And they went berserk. They saw it, and like it was like, I can't even explain it. It was like caged animals. Like they completely lost their minds. Like started, and one of the guys, he grabbed the megaphone off someone else when he saw it, and he pointed at us and he said, "You with that fucking sign, you don't speak for us. You don't fucking speak for us." And they all started giving us the finger and like spitting at us and screaming Nazi and like Nazi scum. And we just stood there. We stood there for maybe like half an hour before Posey came on, and we just stood there and took the abuse. But I like it was frightening. Like some of them looked like they were gonna hop the barricade, and like they were so violent and like telling us to die and stuff. Like I'm laughing, but it's just like, how is that even real? That's what you have to put up with just for a sign that says "Stop Violence Against Women and Gays." So you're saying yes, violence against women and gays? Is that it? Am I getting that right? And we didn't say anything, and the guards were looking at them and then looking at us and kind of reading our sign and going, "What? Why do they have an issue with this?" Like even the guards had no idea. They could see how crazy it was, and something in me just got like turned on a switch in my brain or something. And I went, okay, I'm going to speak. I need to speak, because it was mostly older women talking. Like there was a few speakers ahead of me, and it was older women, and there was no lesbians that had gotten up and spoken yet. I just went, I need to say something. I need to say something, because like these are all like in their 20s looking like lunatics and screaming abuse, and they're saying that they are the gay community of Ireland. So I got up and I had nothing planned. And it just happened.
I was 17 when I was first called transphobic because I said that lesbians don't do dick. I attended belong to the state-funded NGO youth groups that are for LGBT. I was called transphobic there. I was told that men can be lesbians. I witnessed so many young girls with eating disorders cutting themselves up, identifying out of their womanhood. And they were told that that was acceptable. And we're told to fucking shut up and put up as lesbians and that we can't say anything. Sorry.
I was in complete shock. Like, I genuinely don't remember the rest of the day. I ended up getting interviewed by Andy No, and like, I don't have any opinion on him, but he just came over. He happened to be there and was like, oh, can I interview you? And I didn't even know who he was. And I was like, yeah, whatever, because I was the spokesperson for Not All Gays. So I went, yeah, whatever, completely in a daze. Don't remember talking to him. I can barely even watch the video of that now, because I'm like, I can see how dazed I am in it. But it was just, now looking back, I'm like, that was the most exciting
moment. Yeah.
And that broke my anonymity, obviously. And then I was just like, it was like this huge sigh of relief, because I'd been like, there was so many times that things would happen online that I'd be like, no, I'm gonna be like, no, I'm a real person. Stop saying that I'm like some anonymous bot or like a sock account. I'm not. I'm a real person. I'm 25. Stop saying that it's all like older women. This idea that like all the gender critical or like, you know, rad femmes or TERFs or whatever phrases, that it's all like older women. I'm like, no, stop saying that. It's just not. It's simply not true.
Well, you did it. You did it. Well done.
And like this huge sigh of relief then, like once I got down off the high of that the following day, and then I was just like, oh my God, I don't have to hide anymore. I can do it. Like, I can just say what I want now. Like, I don't care. Yeah. And like, whatever mouthing off online, like, I really don't care. What are they going to say? Like, I've heard it all before, and it changes nothing. It doesn't change how I feel about it. I'm going to continue speaking. Like, so that's why it's exciting, because it kind of changed.
Yeah. I think that it's that moment when you go through the fear and do it anyway, and then it's done.
I didn't even think like, and then I was waiting for my turn, and I thought, I'm sure Aja can tell you, because she was stewarding, and I was gonna get sick. I was standing waiting for my turn, and I had gone completely pale. I was shaking. My whole nervous system was gone, because but I was just doing without thinking. Like, I had nothing planned, but I was just like, I need to do this. I need to do this. And even Posey could see it, and she was like standing behind the speaker ahead of me, being like, yeah, you're on next, it's fine, just breathe, because I was a wreck, but I knew I just needed to do it, and I'm so glad I did. But like, it was,
and that's going to be one moment in years to come when there's two other women talking like us, and they'll say, there was this one day and I heard this woman, and she was only 25. She said a piece. You've made history there. Yeah,
I know. I have had people say like, oh, I've sent this to this person and it piqued them, and it changed their mind, because it was this, because I talked about belong to and the abuse that happens to the young, particularly young lesbians, just because they want to have short hair and wear Doc Martens. That means you're a bloke, and they're girls like self-harming and stuff as well. Like, so many of the teenagers in Belong To at that time were like self-harming, had eating disorders, and just trying to escape their female body.
Well, it's interesting, because just a bit of historical perspective on that. I've been running a youth theatre group since you were born. 1998 was the year, and we've done political theatre about all sorts of issues.
Yeah.
And so there's been literally 20. I wrote during COVID. I wrote the history of our women youth theatre group, and all
Yeah.
the plays are all put together, all the rest of it. Now, in phases, you see, we were asked in 2009 by the Department of Health. They had no information about young people and bisexuality, and they put out an open call for projects that would find out about young people and bisexuality. So I put a bid together and got the funding and did it with my youth group, and we did a play called Being Bi in a Straight World, and the Department of Health really liked it, and then that they said, could we tour it, and we changed it a bit and called it Look Both Ways, and then we were asked if we could use it as a training tool for the NHS. So then the kids said, we want to turn it into a film. We don't want it to just be a film of the play.
Yeah.
So we then turned it into a film, and we shot it on the streets here in the town. And you know, there was a moment when we were and obviously because it was about bisexuality, it was actually about lesbian, gay and bisexual. It was all in there. And there was a scene where a lad was being beaten up in an underpass under the road, and we hadn't, but I mean, you know, I didn't have that much of a budget. I hadn't kind of got you know, somebody to check out the, what do you call it, I can't even think, you know, the scenes where, you know, what is it called, the person that checks the venues and the places. Location coordinator. Didn't have one of them. So nobody had bothered to tell the police, and somebody drove past and thought that somebody was really being beaten up. So the next thing we know, blue lights the lot, the police, you know, to convince them that this was actually just a play. Anyway, sorry, that was an aside. But the point that relates to what you said is, at the time, you would not believe the number of kids that were identifying as bisexual. And at the Women's Centre, prior to that, we had the self-harming. Absolutely massive. We had to start a self-harming support group, you know, and then prior to that, there was the anorexia. And I can see, because I've lived through, done a play about, interviewed, and then it disappears again. And then there's the next thing. And then there's the next thing. And all of it has at its root girls trying to identify out of their bodies to get away from misogyny and hypersexualization. And I mean, I think we're all clear about that. I'm really aware that this fantastic conversation has been going on for nearly an hour and a half.
Oh my God, already?
It's 10 to whatever the next hour is, 10 to 9.
Oh my God.
So I'm just thinking, I'm going to the question that we were talking about, the most exciting thing. I shared my circle at Greenham Common, but I want to tell you a funny one, because excitement comes in many forms. And I thought a really innocent, and it's about spontaneity again. One of the things that we did in the 80s and 90s, well, at 70s, 80s and 90s actually, but there was obviously the porn industry and you know, sex shops and all the rest of it. And this Australian woman, who was actually my first lesbian relationship, what they used to do was to put super glue on a brick and then lean up against the window with the brick behind them, and then walk away, and the brick would be there stuck to the window. And in order to get the brick off, it meant smashing the window. So anyway, she'd been getting me all revved up about this, and nobody else wanted to do anything. And anyway, we didn't have a sex shop in Corby. But we did in the next town. So anyway, it was percolating in my brain. Anyway, I had a really good friend, an Irish Catholic, who was you know, at the time she was 53 anyway at the time, and I was well, it was, you know, I was 25 when you were, no, wait a minute, you were 25, you are 25 now. I did all of these sums right. I was 42 in 1998, so there I was wandering around Kettering with Bridie, And Bridie was she was a shopper. I'm
Mhm.
terrible at shopping, but she'd like, she'd fiddle with things and look at things and
Yeah.
let's go in this shop. That looks nice. I'm bored out of my wits. And we found ourselves in the street where the private shop was.
Mhm.
And just on the spur of the moment, I thought, that's it, I'm doing it. Because I remember the thing for me had been, I had counselled a woman the day before, and this was a woman who had got in the taxi and come face to face with her rapist because he was driving the taxi. And I'd been meant to be giving a talk to a sixth form about rape. And instead of preparing for the talk, I'd actually been counselling this woman. And I was just fizzing. And it was just this connection between pornography and rape and violence against women. And there we were walking past the private shop. So I said, Bridie, let's go in here. So anyway, we walk in. And the funny stuff is that Bridie was walking around picking things up and looking at things and just like slowly realizing that this wasn't a new doily to put over the toilet roll at home, or do you know what I mean? Little thirtly things that you get in a craft shop. She was picking up, handcuffs and dildos and Christ knows what, all sorts of sex toys and, whips, the lot. I mean, it was all there. And I went over to what was a video stand in the olden days. There were videos.
Yeah.
The hardcore porn on this video stand, and I put my hand at one end and went like that. And they all flew off and flew across the shop and started knocking things off shelves and everything. And I did three. It was a fantastic way to get out.
Yeah.
And I was saying, next time you serve a customer, think about the connection between pornography and rape.
Yeah.
All these things. And Bridie's like in shock at the door, going, "What the fuck is going on here?" And I said, "Come on, Bridie," and we walked out. We walked down the street, and I could hear in my head, "No, I'm going to be arrested." Like, I had this whole movie playing off in my head because the adrenaline was pumping, And she said, "Do you think we can go and have a cup of tea somewhere?" It's just like, they said, "What were you doing, Paula? Where were we? What was the matter?" She had no clue of what had just happened.
Yeah.
I mean, but I'll never forget that one because in hindsight, it was really funny. But to be able to just physicalize that thing without really hurting anybody. Anyway, that was my funny moment.
Yeah, we have me and the other two not all gays lesbians, like we're very good friends, like we're best friends. They're actually a couple, but we spend so much time together, and like we have non-political conversations as well, but we're always plotting and scheming different things we could do. Like, we're hugely anti-surrogacy. That's one of our big things, because we're also we're in Roddy Colleen. We're involved in that group as well, which is like young radical feminists or women's liberationists, we prefer to be called. But because there's so many different phrases used now within the people who are gender critical or critical of gender ideology, and then like the radical feminists, and there's so many different people coming into it now that it's hard. So we've decided we're women's liberationists, Roddy Colleen, but the three of us do be scheming all the time about like, what can we do to like graffiti this thing. Like, the Pornhub has a what would you call it? They have an office in Dublin that they work out of. They have Mind Geek, or they sneakily changed their name to ALO or ALO Trust or something like that. Mind Geek did, but they have several of their subsidiary companies in this building. So we're plotting and scheming all the time about how we can kind of protest that, and then protest surrogacy.
Super glue brick.
We haven't thought of that. Like, but we have, and we're always stickering every time we go out anywhere. We have a load of stickers and just stickering all over the place. That's like, as much as the activism is serious, sometimes it is.
You can have fun, can't you?
You can have so much fun, especially if you're just kind of running around stickering and being a general nuisance.
So what were you up to in 1998? You were meant to ask me that. I've kind of said a bit of what I was up to. And then I'm meant to ask you, what would you like to achieve by my age? So how do you see your life when you're 67?
When I'm 67, I'm trying to think, like, that's hard. What I'd want to do. Like, I want to be, hopefully I have, you know, a life partner. I do want to get married. I know not every person who's gay like believes in marriage. Lots of people don't believe in marriage. I do. I'm complete hopeless romantic. Always have been. So, you know, hopefully have myself a nice wife. Maybe some kids if that's a possibility. But, you know, I have issues with probably all of the ways that we as lesbians can have children. There's, you know, ethical questions around all of them. But I'd be happy with just having cats too. So that would be, you know, be happy with just as long as I can have at least 4 cats, then I'll be fine. I don't know. In terms of like activism, I hope that I can, you know, I hope that I get to see actual, you know, that this is kind of ended and lesbians do not have to be quiet or pretend, even just pretend that they're okay with men who identify as women, that, you know, this has passed and that lesbians feel free to say, no, I'm same-sex attracted. That in my lifetime that this is stopped and it's sex-based rights. And yes, you can go and do all of that by yourself, but it doesn't mean we all have to put up with or like agree with you or believe or call you a woman if we don't want to, or a lesbian if we don't, you know, you're a man. And that, you know, lesbians, especially the younger lesbians, that they don't feel like they have to be a man just because they're gender non-conforming. That you know, that's kind of my focus at the moment. That, so I suppose just that would be changed. But you know, like right now it feels a little impossible. I know the tide feels like it's turning sometimes in all of it, but then it's just so hard, and the laws keep making it more difficult, and more and more people identifying, and more kids as well, and just making it easier to self-ID and younger to self-ID, and then detransitioner numbers are going up. So I just, by 67, I hope that has all stopped, and that maybe the feminist movement can focus on other things, not men pretending to be women. That's what I'd want to see. I think, yeah, that would be my big focus, is just.
Well, that's it's you'll have to write to me in heaven and tell me, because I won't be here then by the time you're 67. But that's a good aim to have. And I was just thinking, the thing about what I was doing when I was 19, when you were born, what really interested me at that point is we were coming up to the millennium.
Oh yeah.
And that is really what got me focused on lesbian activism, because I couldn't conceive of entering a new millennium and not being able to openly hold hands or kiss your partner.
Yeah.
And so we started a thing called Lesbian Visibility, and it was interesting because it, you know, we'd this thing about at the Women's Centre starting to buy resources for lesbians and stuff, we still had to do stuff outside. So we used to have a Monday group, and it was around that time there was the Admiral Duncan pub bombing in Soho. And so we had to actually have police backup to meet. And this actually ties in with one of you're meant to then ask me, how has the lesbian scene changed since you came out? So here you go. We used to have to meet in a place that the police knew where we were meeting, and we had a panic alarm. Yeah, and that was to do with, actually, people might try and kill you. So that, plus the fact that at Greenham it was a shoot to kill policy from the outside. A lot of the older lesbians that are involved in this stuff, it's kind of like, just stand there and call me horrible names if you like, mate. But it's like, it's nothing like what we've dealt with. So yeah, it feels a bit like that. But anyway, so we had we met in this place that the police okayed, and actually it was quite near the police station, so that was quite handy. But if we change venue, we had to let them know, and they would make sure that we were on their quick alert, you know, like the panic alarm was one thing, but if we phoned, they knew, like with domestic violence, there are some of you that are on the immediate list. Anyway, it then turns out that there were £500 grants being awarded by our council. So I said, why don't we apply for that? Because then we can do some stuff, get some leaflets, whatever, you know, and make the lesbian visibility campaign a bit more visible. And we applied to the council, and they said, having been advised by our lawyer, who happened to be a gay man, we can't give you £500 because of clause 28, because it would be seen to be promoting homosexuality. Well, we knew that was bollocks, because it wasn't in a school. This was a support group for lesbians in the town. So we had a thing at the time. This was part of, you know, what the lesbian scene was like. In our county, we had the Northamptonshire Lesbian and Gay Alliance, and it was lesbian and gay. I was at a meeting in London when the B was kicking off and saying, what about us? And shortly after that meeting, the B got added, because I remember that happening. But there was once when it was just L and G, and they had a lesbian officer, and she said, I tell you what, Paula, let's go and speak to your council. So she got a meeting, and she said to the council, I'll bring somebody from the group. Now, what we did in those days as part of keeping safe, and it was actually, you know, the police thought it was a good idea, if we wrote to anybody, we had a pseudonym. So they had a letter saying that Michelle from the Alliance, and I'm not going to say it right, and Mary Smith, let's say that was our pseudonym, and Mary Smith from the lesbian visibility group were going to come and see them. So we turn up at the council. Now, at the time, in my arts work and in my professional work within the town, I worked with the council. I wasn't out to everybody. I mean, I think it was fairly obvious, but I hadn't actually made that statement. And we'd been challenging the council about their, you know, like now, all the diversity and inclusion people are trying to get gender identity snuck in. Well, in those days, sexual orientation wasn't necessarily in their equalities policy. So they've had several letters from Mary Smith challenging their policies and what have you. So we're there at the building, there's Michelle and there's me, and the head of the council came and said, oh, hello, do you want to come through? What are you doing here, Paula? And I said, I'm Mary Smith. And it was, honestly, my work with the council from then on took a nosedive. Because they took it as a breach of trust. And I said, listen, there is no way we can operate at the moment openly as gay people without coming up against exactly what's happening right now. You're behaving differently to me now that you know I'm a lesbian. No, it's not that you're a lesbian, it's that you've lied. So no, it's not a lie, it's a pseudonym. It's actually to keep us safe. Because if it was signed by Paula Boulton, how do I know that you're not going to be, you know, treating me differently at work or whenever we come together? Anyway, it messed it all up. It really did. But that was kind of what we were up against in terms of the law and activism at the time. So there you go. That was me at your age. One thing that we haven't talked about, I just want to add something here that is off script, and that is, you know, you mentioned the girls' school, women only. I mentioned the women's tent, and then I mentioned the women's centre, and Greenham Common was a women's world. We were building a new thing. The other thing we had from 1998, so from when you were born up until 2016, was a fabulous women's music festival every year in August in Wales. And for the last few years of it, I was the musical director, so it was great. But every year you could go and live a women's world for that entire week or 2 weeks if you were through.
That sounds so nice. I didn't know it doesn't exist. I'm guessing.
Exactly. And I mean, I hadn't appreciated until I was putting this talk together, because I was thinking, well, I don't know, you know, I had a few women in the town and what have you, but well, why did I feel I was part of a women's community? Because once Greenham stopped, where was that women's world? And it was at Wit. And I still have connections with women who I lived with, you know, and we literally built it, physically built it. You'd build the structures, the toilets, the
Oh my God.
the whole thing, you know, you would create a world, and it was such a free space to be. I ran around naked quite a lot of the time, as some of the other women did. It was completely, you know, on the way to the showers, oh, you drop your towel, oh, well, never mind. We're all women. To actually be in a space that's safe, where you're all women and you can be free, you know, and none of us thought that it would ever go. That's the other thing I realised. We took it for granted. And when I give talks now, and I've been doing a lot, you know, as Lesbian Labour, but I've given lots of talks, especially last year, we've come across young women, especially butch lesbians, who didn't see women like them anywhere and therefore thought they must be something else because they didn't see it. If there'd been Wit, if there'd been Women in Tune Festival, if there'd been other places, they would have been able to see that the range of what it is to be a woman and what it is to be a lesbian is massive.
Yeah.
And they didn't have to change. And for me, that's why I have a commitment now, although I do my political lesbian activism, to creating spaces where lesbians can be together, whether it's Zoom, wherever it is, because we have to see the variety that there is right across the age range. You know, for you to be able to see that there are lesbians that have lived a life, therefore there's a future for you. For us to be able to see young women like you getting on with it, it's really important that we have these spaces. So there we go. How can elder lesbians reach and help younger lesbians today, to finish our talk?
I'm trying to think, like, I think just like having these kind of conversations with younger lesbians to say, like, this is what it was like. I think especially again with the butch masculine lesbians, younger lesbians, they're the ones being targeted the most by this gender craziness, because it's women escaping their female body for one way or another, and then they're the prime targets because they're, you know, they're not the stereotype of what a woman is meant to behave like or whatever. It's just such nonsense, and I've always known that's nonsense. But I think it's hard now, and so many of them just like saying that they're men, or like the amount of lesbian friends I've lost over this, and me having my stance on it, like lost to it because they've like the first trans identified person that I ever met was when I was 14, and she's, you know, has a beard now and has had her double mastectomy, and like losing lesbians like that, it's just really hard. So I think being able to see older lesbians, that they've, you know, that there are butch lesbians who just are butch lesbians, and they aren't men, and they, you know, they've gotten to an old age and they've done all of these amazing things, and it's okay to not be as feminine as me. And like, I know I'm maybe the most feminine lesbian that I know, like, but doesn't make me any less of a lesbian, and it doesn't make the butch lesbians men. Like,
I think it's lovely actually, because Freya from Scottish Lesbians, she's another feminine lesbian, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. And what it tells me is that we are able to be who we are without having to conform to what we had to create in order to not be what they said we were. Because there's a lot of, I mean, there's practical reasons why women have short hair, etc. La la la, wear practical clothes. I know all of that, but some of it is uniform. Some of it is, therefore I will be seen as, and therefore my tribe will know who I am. And, you know, also some women do it to to disappear as well. And I don't want us to disappear. I want us to be bright, beautiful butterflies, if we are bright, beautiful butterflies. And symbolism.
Mhm.
So my little rainbow bag,
It's so cute.
I have had that for years. I got it somewhere. I used to wear rainbow stuff all of the time, and of course the rainbow has now stopped being a thing. But I was just thinking, you know, we all go around with our symbols, don't we? I've got my I don't carry this bag around. I put them on here to show you, actually. But you know, we all have these badges, and what happens when you wear them? What happens when you wander around in these tops? And however brave we are sitting here now, have you found yourself with a badge on somewhere where you know it's hostile, and you feel you know your prickly senses go?
Oh, like I would not wear this just on an average day. It would be, you know, we'd made them to go to Filiat to have like our little crew. But I felt so brave outside Filia, you know, when the other crowd were across the street and the three of us just stood there. And then when he was the main guy was shouting, telling us about what feminism is, most outrageous thing I've ever heard. That young man saying feminism, like blah blah blah, I'm a feminist, and we started shouting back, the three of us, because we're gobby Irish Irish girls, and we just like, you are a man, what are you talking about? But I would never wear this, because like I'd probably wear it down the street, but I would never wear it, you know, into places that I know that a lot of the staff would be kind, whatever.
Yeah, it's weird how it can be scary, because I'd been given a talk. Well, I was with Rosie Duffield. Where had we? Oh, it was last year when we were going to Cardiff.
I was
we'd been at the LGB Alliance conference, and then somebody got a free coach and came to Cardiff. And I wanted to drink when we got there. Everybody had gone to bed, and I thought, well, I'm off then. And I walked along the street, and I could hear like really loud music coming from somewhere. And I thought, look, all I want is half a cider. I'm going to go in here. And there's a bouncer at the door. And I said to him, can I just go in and get a drink? You know, I don't want to kind of join in whatever. Is it a ticket price? I didn't know what it. He said, no, you can, love. He said, it is a bar, but I have to warn you. He said, it's a gay bar. Now, I would have seen a rainbow thing. I would have known that was home.
Yeah.
He said that, and I thought, fuck, what am I going to do? This is what I was wearing.
Yeah.
So I said to him, thinking, I can handle this. I said, well, I went like this with the jacket. I went, I'll be all right then, won't I? It was so funny. And he said, I love you for two reasons. He said, both of those reasons. I'm a Labour man myself. So we had this big political conversation, and all I wanted was a flipping cider. And I went in and I got the drink, and I felt so out of it, so out of place. I was offered a shot by a 6'4" person. I'll say no more. It was really uncomfortable, but I tried to squash it, because I thought, I have got a right to be there. You know, these spaces that say they are LGBT, if it's got a, excuse me again, but if it's got a fucking L in it, I've got a right to be there. You know, and I felt like the thing about age sometimes works as a bit of a protective factor, because I don't see myself as 67. It's absolutely, I don't feel that at all.
Yeah.
You know, people see me and they can't work it out, because I don't behave like other people my age either. So they get really confused, and I'm also quite vital. So there's a lot of vitality around, and then there's this in the way, you know, or around. So I confuse people, and they don't know what they're reacting to. And I knew that I would have all of that going for me if it kicked off. Or I could go into, excuse me, I happen to be an old age pensioner. Whatever. I've never used it, Annaig. I've never used it, but I'm ready. I've got it in my arsenal. If that's what I have to do to be respected, then I shall do it.
Cardiff was crazy though, because we were at Cardiff as well, and that was obviously before Not All Gays for Glasgow. some of the guys came with us, and they went to the men's men against, what is it, against sexism, or the thing that's tied in.
Yeah.
They went to that, and then so we had like a big house for in Glasgow. There was like 10 of us in the house, 10 or 11 of us in the house. It was crazy. It took about a week to recover after Glasgow. But Cardiff, we were there in that bar, you know, the night that one of the women was kicked out of the bar on the last night of yeah. We were there at another table. We were kicked out as well. We were threatened with, but we didn't even know. She just happened to be another attendee of Filia, and someone at her table came over and asked us for a lighter because she had spoken to us earlier on in the day. But it was a table full of lesbians just talking about the marriage equality, and because there was an older lesbian with us, an older Irish lesbian. We were like, what was it like in the 90s, you know, when, you know, it was decriminalized to be gay, and then, you know, what was that like before marriage equality, and like, you know, before the trans stuff came into it. And she was telling us about how nice it was, and like felt like a breath of fresh air. And then the change when self-ID came in, and this rise in the trans thing, and then we were just kicked out because the woman had asked a man to leave, and it was a drag queen. Like it wasn't even a trans identified male. There was a drag queen in the bathroom. She asked him to leave, and he kicked off. And then she went outside, and she was asked to leave, and she was like, why am I being asked to leave? And then it was a whole kerfuffle. But they just assumed that we were
part of the same thing. Yeah,
that we were part of Filia or whatever, you know, that we were crazy rude ladies. It's great. That was the first time that we were kicked out. I think that was the only time we were kicked out. Even when we've been banned from that bar. I have gone back to that bar, but I've snuck in with someone because I'm like, I go in at a certain time, and the girl that I'm seeing sneaks me in, and they're not going to say anything to her. But
I mean, that's why we need events and lesbian spaces. And you mentioned Christine Ellingson, and this time last year I was planning the Lesbian Not Criminal tour with Tonya, and we did Edinburgh, Leeds, Cardiff, and London one night after another, and she and I ended up having a musical partnership as well, which was great.
Oh yeah.
I'd put my lesbian marching song that I'd written. I'd put, you know, there was this idea to put photos along with it, and I mentioned it to her, and she said, send me the song. And because of her contacts with Eurovision,
yeah,
she put a pop backing track to it. It's absolutely hilarious. And then I said, well, you know, can we not have here's some Pathé newsreel footage of the suffragettes marching, and look, here's some pictures from lesbian strength march, because that's the other bit. I mean, this is a lesbian strength project now, but since 2019 I've been part of the Lesbian Strength Collective, and we try to have this march, and we're now broadening out a bit, because it's not enough to just have one march every year, especially when there've been several. One we couldn't do because of COVID, one, you know, got pulled because there's all sorts of things getting in the way, and with this fabulous collective of women, so we want to do loads more things about lesbian visibility and lesbian strength. So anyway, one of the things that happened was that those images and the suffragette images got put together by Tonya's fabulous video editing, and the lesbian marching song would be performed live every night with this fabulous footage in the background, and this crazy Euro pop background.
Yeah.
Denise, I had a cold when I sang it as well. I think I recorded it on this device. Anyway, I'd imagined when I wrote that song that there would be one day when the lesbians would march through the city, and it was inspired by, this is going to resonate for you as an Irish woman, we've got a very strong Irish community in Corby. We've got equal numbers, possibly, of Catholics and Protestants. So we've got a lot of sectarianism in the town.
Okay.
But it's exported sectarianism, so it's hard baked. It's not real, but they carry out these rules and stuff. Anyway, so I am a celebrant as well, funeral celebrant. I'd been asked to do the funeral for the head of the Orange Lodge.
Okay.
And this included a Protestant marching band and the whole of the Rangers Support Club with their scarves on. I had to wear a Rangers scarf at the funeral to do this. I mean, it was completely mad. And I stepped into this world unknowingly. I mean, I knew the bloke, but I'm not part of that world. And there were like these masses of people all wearing a uniform and all singing these songs and marching along to these tunes. And I was thinking, whatever I disagree with about what they might be singing, they've got an identity and it is clear. They know who they are. They know what, by visual symbols, they know who they are. By sounds, they know. We haven't got any of that. And it was the next day I wrote my lesbian marching song. So I'd always had this idea of, you know, the lesbian equivalent. I mean, it is so wrong in lots of ways, but that's what it was. So at the London Lesbian Not Criminal thing, Julia Long got up and started a conga round the room. So I got my lesbians marching to my song, but it was in a safe space in the London venue with them all bopping around singing lesbian, lesbian, lesbian. It's nuts. But yeah, that's a very peculiar story, that one. We don't necessarily want to acknowledge the roots of that song, but there we go. Anyway, it is 21:26.
Oh my God.
And we've spoken for nearly 2 hours. So what do you want to say to finish?
I don't know. I've just had a great chat. It's great hearing like all the stories from that. I love talking to older lesbians because you get to hear all of these stories, you know, when the gender ideology part wasn't in it. And it was just, you know, being lesbians and fighting for women's rights and not having to tell the very basic concept that men are not lesbians. Like that now that's at the forefront of most of the women's rights thing is like, no, you're not a woman, leave us alone, none of your business. Stay.
There was once a world, there was once, and there will be again.
Hearing all the like the collective sisterhood, that's what I love about Philia, is that like sense of just like, oh, we're all just here, like just women just having this like women only space. And all of the stories that the older feminists and older lesbians in particular, like it's just so nice. And I'm like, oh, I hope we have that one day.
Well, I can tell that you're going to be one of the women that makes sure that you do have. And I think this is possibly the beginning of a new lesbian strength move to do this older and younger sharing. So hopefully you'll be involved in this going forward as well, because we need to find other women to have these conversations. And I'd love to carry on talking to you outside this space. So
yeah, definitely.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed it.
And thank you for sharing all of your stories. I had a great talk. Thank you so much.
All right then. Bye.